a co-host to do that?
No, I can do that without making you a co-host. There you go. You should be able to do that now.
Oh, so I can share my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have just turned on the recording.
Oh, you're going to record it. Great. Wonderful.
Yes.
In that case, let us go ahead and start with some silent worship. Well, thank you again, friends, for showing up. I was confessing to Rick earlier that I am very nervous. Even though I'm among friends, I'm really nervous. This is my first presentation. One thing, introducing myself, I also want to again introduce Mallory Kremen. She's going to be helping out. So if people, she's waving. If some people want to put a question in the chat, you could do that. She's going to be monitoring that. Also, Jeannie, I don't know when we get to the end if people will want to use the hands raised function for questions, but if you could monitor that for me, because I don't know how busy I'm going to be trying to share my screen. But actually, that's what I'm going to do right now.
I'd be happy to do that. And so at the end, if friends have questions, click on the participants list and you'll see the list of participants off to the side. And then there will be a blue hand. And if you click on that, that means that you want to ask a question.
Yeah. And if you could mute yourself while during the presentation, that would be great. So let's see here. Oops. I guess let me try this again. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully when I go to slideshow. So is everybody seeing a slide with my name and the city of Berkeley and myself standing by the Russian River up in Northern California?
Yes.
Everybody?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Well, then we're ready to go. And once again, my name is Tom Yamaguchi. I'm been a member of Strawberry Creek meetings since the 90s. I'm currently transferring my membership to Berkeley and appreciate everybody from all our local congregations showing up for this presentation. I am also a volunteer for Citizens Climate Lobby. As I mentioned before, this is my first presentation. It's something I've wanted to give for a long time. It was actually scheduled for last March 15th, and because of COVID, that didn't happen. But I will be talking about the handout. Actually, what happened was we had got a copy of this handout from the Friends Committee on National Legislation of the various bills that were up then, and I volunteered to do that. So, as I said, things with COVID sort of derailed things for a while, but now I feel confident enough to try to do this on Zoom. So we'll see what happens, and we'll be talking about not only that FCNL handout, but I also wanted to talk about the contrast with the state of California's cap and trade program. And also something that's come up this fall is that we actually have a couple of local ballot measures in Berkeley and Albany that are also going to be a way of putting a price on carbon emissions. And I just felt a need to talk about that. So I've added that to the talk as well. So one of the things before we go on is, because I sort of have a lengthy presentation, what I'm not going to talk about, and that is the causes in global warming, and all the horrible things and the bad news. We always, as Quakers, we know what the bad news is. We know what the cause of global warming is. What we're looking at now is not only the solutions, but how we can talk about those solutions to not only each other, but to non-friends. So that's basically what I'm gearing my presentation for. One of the things I wanted to talk before that is how I came to my own climate activism. And basically my own activism regarding energy and climate goes back to the 1970s when I was during the energy crisis that we had then. And I became very interested in sustainable energy, particularly regarding transportation. So I became a very avid bicyclist, became very interested in public transportation, getting to shift away from our dependence on private cars. One of the things, right, Hal, this is a picture of me and another volunteer at one of our local bike to work days. So I've been a volunteer for local bicycle organizations as well. And one of the things that during my early activism was my interest in a concept called peak oil. And that was basically the theory that the world was running out of oil. And so with that, I sort of have a confession regarding the climate issue. And that is, I'm really sort of consider myself late to this issue. And a part of it was because I was a believer in the peak oil theory. I thought, hey, world's running out of fossil fuels. We're going to have to convert to sustainable sources. So, that'll take care of that. There'll be no problem. We won't have to worry about global warming. Well, a couple decades back, I went to a conference in San Francisco and ran into a couple of climate scientists there and asked them, what should I be more concerned about, global warming or peak oil? And they said, you know what? We're going to run out of atmosphere long before we run out of fossil fuels. And as it turned out, they're right. We are constantly discovering new sources of fossil fuels. Fracking has made finding natural gas a lot easier, and so we need to deal with climate the climate crisis, and that's why I'm here. So I want to talk about how I got to actually what I consider my niche in climate activism. A few years ago, I went to the St. John's Presbyterian Church in South Berkeley, where I heard from Dr. Catherine Hayo, and she basically, I was just so impressed. I actually started by volunteering with Citizens Climate Lobby because of her, and I realized, as I said, where are my niches? Dr. Hayo, she's a Canadian, but she's also teaches at Texas Tech, and she is a climate scientist, and she's also an evangelical Christian. And so I went to her to hear her, and she was talking about values and how we can bring our values to the climate debate. And I said, that's it. As a person of faith, this is what I can do. I can talk about values. I can talk about, because I'm not a scientist. I know very little about science, but I can talk about values and to people of faith, and that's what I'm doing. Hopefully now, and will hopefully continue to do that. So once again, I'm going to just say what I'm not going to talk about. That's the climate, the causes of climate change. As I said, we know all about that. But I did want to just talk about, as I said, when we talk about climate to other people, what is helpful. And for me personally, I think what is helpful, especially when we talk about the differences between climate and weather. First of all, there are some people we can't talk to. There are people whose minds will not be changed, whether they're just so thoroughly confused that they don't know the difference between climate and weather, or they're just so stubborn. They just will not listen. But I believe that there are people that can and are listening if we just give the right message. And so one of the things I've been thinking about in terms of how I deliver my message is I like metaphors. And so if I'm talking to non-friends about, especially the contrast of what's weather and climate change, one metaphor I like to think of, excuse me, is the loaded dice. And basically, if we look at different weather events as combinations of the rolls of the dice, we keep rolling the dice. We're just going to keep getting different numbers. There's not going to be a pattern. But let's just say we load the dice just the tiniest bit. Then, as we keep rolling the dice, we see these patterns develop. And with climate change, or with the introduction of greenhouse gases, it's not only just loading the dice once, but constantly loading more and more and more, so that we're actually seeing these patterns develop. And those patterns are already in view. Talking about this morning during Berkeley meeting for worship, that the Gulf Coast is preparing for another severe tropical storm. So we got the tropical storms that are becoming more frequent and heavy. Of course, we've had tropical storms, we've had hurricanes for as long as the Earth has been in existence, or at least the seas have been in existence. But the pattern is it's getting more and more and more that these are becoming more frequent and more intense. So that's what I call the loaded dice. I should also mention I asked Catherine Hayhoe if she had a good metaphor. She introduced one concept of the forest and the trees. So if you think of the trees as the individual weather events, then forest represents the climate. And of course, we know what's happening with climate change and what it's doing to our forests. So I wanted to talking about now about getting into the meat of what we're talking about, and that is regarding the climate pricing, what we call these market solutions to the climate crisis. And I want to talk with the concept of an externality. And basically, as you can see here, this is a concept that economists use. Once again, I'm not an economist, but it's a cost or benefit that affects a third party who didn't choose to incur those costs or benefits. And it's in itself, an externality is not necessarily good or bad. There could be good examples and bad examples. One bad example, once again, is those manufacturing activities that cause air pollution. And then all the rest of it we pay through our health costs and the cleanup costs. On the other hand, vaccinations provide benefits to people who are not vaccinated. What we call that herd immunity. So as he said, externality is something that we need to consider with the fact that we're pumping all these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and we're all paying the price, whether we're paying for the price of the oil or the coal or whatever. We're all paying the price. Somebody's got to pay that price. And who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be for the people with insurance? Their insurance costs are going to go up to pay for the damage from the hurricanes and the wildfires and the such? Or is it going to be the taxpayers paying for the crumbling infrastructure as a result of rising sea levels and windstorms and stuff like that? So the question is, somebody's going to pay. And if we don't do something, it'll cost a lot of money. So probably the best thing is to do is if we're paying it up front, the costs are going to be cheaper in the long run. So paying for preventing that carbon going into the atmosphere in the long run is going to be cheaper than actually paying for the cleanup costs. So now I would like to go ahead and talk about the cap and trade program. And here's a little bit of thing from the Environmental Defense Fund I found on their website that just gives a basic overview. One thing, the government sets up a cap across a given industry, ideally the whole economy, and it decides the penalties for violations. The total amount of the cap is split into allowances, each permitting a company to emit a ton of emissions. The government distributes those allowances to the companies, either for free or through an auction. The cap typically declines over time, providing a growing incentive for industry and business to reduce their emissions more efficiently while keeping the production costs down. Companies can cut their pollution faster than can sell allowances to companies that pollute more or bank them for future use. And finally, this market or trade part of the cap and trade gives companies the flexibility in increasing the pool of available capital to make reductions and encourages companies to cut pollution faster, rewards innovation. And this is something that's been done before on other types of pollution, particularly straight air pollution. It has worked in the past, and California, oops, I need to advance my slide. Where am I? Okay, oops. Okay, let's see. All right, I guess there, okay. So I'm missing a slide here. Well, anyway. But at any rate, just talk about California's cap and trade. And that was through, oh, excuse me while I take a drink of water here.
Tom, it did come up on the screen, but then it went away. California cap and trade was right there on my screen. And then now I'm on externality. One there, right there.
Okay,
there
yeah.
It went back.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. That's
okay.
That's okay. Anyway, so AB 32 was signed up in law in 2006 by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And its goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020, which is this year. It authorized the collection of a fee from sources of greenhouse gases, such as oil refineries and electrical power plants. And basically, as I said, this is basically the mechanism that does that. And as I said, this is from the Environmental Defense Fund, which pretty much helped design and implement the cap and trade program. And it has reduced our emissions by 10% between the program's launch in 2013 and in 2018, or actually, between 2013 and 2018. And it has been extended, but the passage in 2016 has been extended and has raised the goal for greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. So as I said, it's collecting a lot of money from these energy companies, and that money currently is being used to do different things. One of them is to fund household energy efficiency upgrades, also land preservation and restoration, public transit, particularly our high-speed rail program, that's getting a lot of money from our cap and trade money. And then twice a year, utility customers, gas electric customers, receive a climate credit on their bills. So you'll notice that twice a year, you'll get a reduction or climate credit. So that is basically the basics of cap and trade. Now I want to go ahead and talk about that handout. I've just got the first page displayed here, but the whole handout is about 3 pages. As you can see at the bottom, the date is September 27th, 2019. So that's almost a year old. And as you know, probably now we're coming close to the end of our legislative session. And so most likely these bills that we're talking about today will need to be reintroduced. So the FCNL handout here lists 7 bills, and they have things in common, they have things that are different. And FCNL has not taken a position on any of these, but they've provided this comparison list so that we can decide what is the best way to go. And so one of the first bills on the list is actually the one that's supported by the Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, and that's HR 763, which is called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. It is a bipartisan bill sponsored by Ted Deutsch and Francis Rooney. And one of the things that these bills have in common and have different is some of them are bipartisan bills, and some of them are Democratic only bills. So this one, as I said, is a bipartisan bill. In the past years, there have been at least one bill I think of that might have been a Republican-sponsored bill. And I think it was Corbello, who unfortunately is no longer in the House. He was a Republican from Florida, and he had a bill. And he was also one of the first members of the Climate Solutions Caucus. That, as I said, unfortunately, he is no longer in the Congress. But as I said, some of these bills are bipartisan and some of them are Democratic only. So as I said, this is pretty much very much in line with what Citizens Climate Lobby has been trying to get enacted. It sets a price on carbon that is at the source. So as the energy companies, like the miners, the oil companies, the mining companies, all those produce the fuel, that carbon is taxed, and also anything that's shipped in, anything that comes in from abroad also gets taxed. And the tax starts in the first year, it starts at $15 per metric ton. And then each year, that tax is increased $10 per ton. So it goes from 15 to 25 to 35. And there are exemptions, particularly there are exemptions for agricultural and for the armed forces or the military. So those are exemptions to that. There also, the revenue is placed in what's called Carbon Dividend Trust Fund, and then equally distributed to all the taxpayers, with a half share going for each child under 19. So that's the dividend part of the fee and dividend. So we have a fee on admissions and a dividend back to consumers.
Is that, Tom, is that the incentive to decrease carbon emissions is the cost, the fee?
Yes, yes, that is indeed. Yes, the idea is as the cost goes up, people will want to conserve or use less in order to spend less. So that's why it's called a market solution. Thanks for bringing that up. So there is also some changes regarding regulation. The EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, will not be allowed to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. However, no other regulations regarding air pollution or energy efficiency standards are affected. So it's only the greenhouse gas emissions that will be out of EPA's regulation. However, also, if the emission goals are not met after 10 years, EPA would be directed by Congress to regulate those emissions to achieve those targets. So the goal there is to decrease emissions by 40% below the 2016 levels in 12 years. And ultimately, the bill seeks to reduce emissions by 90% by 2025 or 2050.
May I ask one more quick question?
Sure.
In many cases in industries, the fines that are levied for not meeting the goals are simply written off as a cost of doing business. How is that avoided here?
I don't, well, there's no fines involved. I mean, they just pay the tax. The tax will be paid. You know, I don't know if what you're talking about is a fine for tax evasion.
Well,
I don't know.
cost...
You know what, Paul, you know what, let me research that for you, because I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
But as I said, you know, pretty much it's a straight tax. It's not like a regulation where if somebody, you know, does something that they're supposed to do, you know, they're supposed to pay a fine or whatever. We're talking about a different mechanism, which is basically a straight tax or fee. But I will verify that for you and get back to you. Okay, sure, thanks. So yeah, so that's, as I said, that's the 763. The next bill that we're looking at is S1128, which is the American Opportunity Carbon Fee Act. This is a Democratic-only bill sponsored by Sheldon Whitehouse. It starts with $52 per metric ton in the first year, increasing by 6% plus inflation each year. So this would give workers a tax credit equal to 6.2% of their earned income for $900, as well as payments to Social Security beneficiaries and other retired and disabled Americans. In addition to that, $10 billion would be given to state grants to fund transition to low carbon economies, including energy assistance programs, job training, and worker transition assistance. So this is sort of a hybrid where you're talking about not only returning money to the consumer or taxpayer, as well as an investment in programs, into government programs. And as I said, its goal was to reduce emissions by 51% by 2029, below the 2005 levels. Okay. Moving on, we have 4058, HR 4058, the Stemming Warming and Augmenting Pay Act, or SWAP. That prices carbon at $30 per ton, starting in 2021, increasing by 5% plus inflation each year. So the price will automatically increase an additional $3 per ton every 2 years if emissions reductions are behind those goals. 70% of the revenue would reduce payroll taxes, 10% to Social Security beneficiaries, 20% to create a carbon trust fund,